All right, so now to jump into my message, I'm like, okay, what time is it? How are we doing? Well, most of you know that I was away on vacation in Alberta to see my family who I had not been with for 3 years. The nice thing about technology today is I could see them through FaceTime calls, but I hadn't been with them for 3 years, and this was a third attempt to actually go and be with them. So I'm so thankful. So thankful that it worked. And I know that many of you were praying for our flights and our time away. I just want to thank you so much. We had very smooth flights there and back. We had no issues. And it was just so important to be with family. It's just so valuable to my heart. So just thank you so much for your prayers. I also want to just appreciate our pastoral team and the many volunteers here at Summerside Community Church for taking care of the many things while I was away. It's amazing how much can pop up in 2 weeks when you're away. But the team handled things very well. They took partners where they needed, really allowing me to rest and get away. We have such a great team here, and I just loved to see the things that they learned. As when the leader is away, you learn things, and you get to stretch yourself into new things. And so it was good. So just a huge thank you to our team and to our volunteers. And then I just appreciated the appreciation that Josh shared last Sunday. So if you were here last Sunday or if you watched online, he just shared that, we've been through so much as a church family over the last 3 years, and you're still here. He just really was appreciating that. And you've displayed sticky love. We've been talking a little bit about what sticky love is, that loyal love. And, that really got me, when I heard Josh share that, really got me thinking that I'm so glad that you are here. I'm so glad that we can come together like this weekly. I was imagining coming to church by myself and just sitting in an empty room. It'd be really boring. And it would get stagnant. And it would really suck. Like that would just be, it would just not be a fun time. There'd be no color. There'd be no one to challenge me or you. No one to bring different ideas, a way of doing things. No one to do the spiritual life with. It wouldn't be very inviting to come to church by ourselves. So without you here, it'd be really hard to keep going. And I think gradually I would just kind of give up. Why bother if I'm by myself? So when I see your faces, when I see you, I'm encouraged to keep going. And I know that when you see each other, it encourages your heart to keep going. And it really makes a difference when you are here. It really does. And we do miss you when you're not here. And I think as humans, because we do forget so easily, and we've been talking about how easily we forget, that we feel these things when we don't see people that we know, and we wonder where they are. We feel these things, but we often don't say them. So I'm going to say it. Your presence is important, and we miss you when you're not here. We do. And life is so much better when we do this together. And when we're experiencing the spiritual life as our paths intersect, kind of like it's not perfectly side by side. We kind of intersect like a grapevine, kind of going through. We intersect, and I'll say that doing it together doesn't necessarily make it easier, right? Because friction does happen. We don't agree on everything, but learning to go through the difficult things and still being together, that's when it gets really sweet. That's when it just gets really precious. So now I'm thinking about all these things, and I start thinking about the lens of Jesus' life on this earth. So we are his disciples. We are disciples of Jesus. We're followers. We're followers of Jesus. And we're here because we choose Jesus. And this is what he said we should do. He said we should come together. We should be together. And when Jesus went around doing the work of the kingdom, it was always in relationship. So he did it with his disciples, and either in small groups of a few or the entire 12. And then there was the 70. He had a group of 70 that he walked with, and when he sent them out in twos, never alone. Now, if you know Jesus' life well, you might say to me, well, Tracy, Jesus did spend time alone. And yes, he did. But when Jesus spent time alone, it was purposeful, which is part of the rhythm he teaches us. It was with the Father in the quiet and the lonely places, so that his focus could be solely on, again, relationship. So relationship with the people around him, relationship with his Father. And what did Jesus say? He said, I only do what my Father is doing. I only do what he is doing. So he completely emptied himself of self. And Scripture tells us in Philippians 2, so Paul says this, he said that Jesus, who being in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. So you are made, and I am made in the image of God. And life is about relationship. It's not about you. It's not about me. And I know many of you have heard this before. You've heard it said, it's not about you. But I really want you to think about this and let that sink in. Life is not about you. So yes, God sees you. He crafted you in your mother's womb. He knows you intimately as the unique individual that he created you to be. But you can't know your uniqueness and even see yourself clearly outside of the context of relationship. We can't be known or know without being with one another. And then I thought about, what did God say to Adam after he created him? He said, it's not good for man. It doesn't benefit a man to be alone. So then what did God do? He created woman. And he said she will be his Ezer Kenegdo. Ezer meaning warrior, and Kenegdo meaning suitable. She is the man's match. So he created a person, a human, another human to be with Adam. And it's interesting, Victor Hamilton puts it this way. Kenegdo suggests that what God creates for Adam will correspond to him. Thus, the new creation will be neither a superior nor an inferior, but an equal. The creation of his helper will form one half of a polarity and will be to man as the South Pole is to the North Pole. So woman is created, and she will be his strongest ally in pursuing God's purposes and his first roadblock when he veers off course. So, it's good. So from the very beginning, we're not to be alone. We're not to choose our own way. We need one another. And then we read Jesus' prayer in John 17, that we would be one like he and the Father are one. So belonging, togetherness, and unity because of Jesus. So let's just take a moment and just think about the reality around us. So this is what Jesus' plan and his purpose is for us, to be in relationship with him, to be in relationship with one another. But what is happening? What are we contending with in our world? So we know that God has an archenemy, right? There's Satan. Thus, we have an enemy. He hates God, and therefore he hates those who God has created. So Satan's desire for us is opposite of God's desire. So God's work in us leads to unity, being together, being in relationship. It leads to life. Satan's work, on the other hand, leads to division and separation, being outside a relationship or broken relationships, death. And how many of you have ever read C.S. Lewis's book, The Great Divorce? Has anyone read The Great Divorce? A few of you. He does a really good job in this book, really looking at the theme. And I was going to go into it, but you know what? For the sake of time, it's not really necessary, so I'm just going to skip ahead. a little bit here. Just move along. So I know Tash is probably trying to follow me on slides, so I'm going to move along. In the book, the biggest thing that it's fascinating because it's his depiction of hell and heaven. There's a bus that goes from hell to heaven, and it's fascinating. So it's a great read. It's a very good read. But he says at the end, the biggest thing that you can pull from it is that he really talks about what matters most is the choice that we have a choice to make. What matters most is that we have a choice to make. And we make that choice every day. Are we going to put Jesus at the center, or are we going to put self at the center? And as a follower of Jesus, who you put at the center, it matters. It matters every day. Everything is pulling at us, pulling our eyes, pulling our time, pulling our energy away to self, away from Jesus. There's these ongoing pulls. And so I just wanted to share with you a story of something that happened to me on my trip home that really digs into the reality of just how real this constant choice is that we have. Who is going to be at the center in your life? And so, let's see here. I'm just going to jump ahead. Okay. So, how many of you love to explore all that life has to offer? You feel this need to have your hand in multiple things? Any of you like to have lots of experiences in life? You have this sense that there's just so much more to experience, or so many things to experience, and you just don't want to miss out. You just don't want to miss out. And so, in most cases, this desire leads you, and it leads me, to tend to push our limits a little bit. Maybe not in everything, but in a lot of things. And so it's really kind of, my mom had reminded me that when she said, when you learn to walk at 9 months old, you actually learn to run and you haven't stopped. You ran around all across the country. And so in my life, I've pushed all kinds of limits. And it has taken an impact on my health at times. It's impacted my relationships. And at times it's impacted my finances because I've pushed limits. So I've been on this journey for the last 15 years of learning to embrace my limits, learning to accept them, learning to see that they're actually not a punishment. They are good. And then asking myself, what is behind, whatever it is whatever limit I've pushed, what is behind it that caused me to push it? What is the root of this? So I'm learning, and sometimes it feels like I'm getting it. I'm understanding how to embrace my limits. And then sometimes I feel like I've got so much more to learn. Can anyone identify with me there? I've got so much more to learn. I'm on this journey of being transformed. And so I'm learning these things. And so Monday morning around 7:30, so this is the past Monday, around 7:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, we're boarding a plane for Toronto. And I had done a little bit of shopping in Alberta because the tax is only 5%, and they have so many more options. And so we had planned that I would do some shopping, so it was planned. But I did ship some things ahead of time because they wouldn't all fit in my suitcase, so some things went into a box. But my carry-on was still a little full. And I didn't have to unzip the extension, though. That extension zipper, that stayed closed. So I was feeling pretty good about that. But it was stuffed. It was stuffed. So we're in line to board the plane, and I am people watching, which I love to do. I love to people watch in airports. It's fascinating. So I'm people watching, and they've been announcing since 7 a.m. that the flight is full, like full. It's going to Toronto, and there will not be enough room for all the carry-on. So this had also happened when we flew out to Calgary, so I wasn't too concerned. I didn't want to check my luggage on the way home, as we had this layover in Toronto that was literally 5 minutes. We landed, we went to the next gate, and we boarded. And I was like, there's no way that my luggage would make it to PEI. There's just no way. And so I didn't want to let go of my luggage. And so I'm feeling some anxiety as I watch the boarding process, because I'm watching very carefully And because I just really did not want to check my suitcase. I just had this issue, this desire to control the situation. I did not want to check my suitcase. So Air Canada had a process. It was very clear. They were watching us, the passengers, in line very carefully. And they were tagging bags on passengers' backs to remind them that their smaller carry-on had to go on the floor. And so I could see that they were trying to normalize the process and prevent any escalations, any really upset people. And they were randomly pulling people out of line to get them to check their one carry-on bag, and they were getting them to put it in that sizer to see if it would fit or not. And so I watched people with larger carry-on bags than mine, because of course I was watching this, get through the lineup, no problem. They didn't get pulled into the suitcase measurer. But I still had this concerned feeling, and sure enough, I got pulled out of line and asked to put my suitcase in the measurer, and it, of course, did not fit. And so I was like, oh. And I was like, my suitcase is kind of an odd little suitcase. It doesn't usually fit anyway, unless it's basically empty. But whatever. I was getting pulled. So I thought, if I could just explain to the person that was measuring the suitcases, if I could just explain that my connecting flight from Toronto to PEI, there was no time, there's only 5 minutes. It doesn't make sense that you'd pull my suitcase when there's no way it's going to get to PEI. It's going to be delayed, maybe it will get lost. And so I'm trying to express my concern about losing my suitcase, and the lady at the measuring place was like, get in line. You're going to check your bag. There was no empathy, there was no sympathy or concern. And so I was like, okay, I'll get in line. And so I got in line to get my bag tagged to get it put under the plane. And so I was, while I was in line, I was watching more people get their, suitcase tagged, and of course I was like, there was just no empathy. We were all going to have to check our bags. So time was ticking, the plane was filling up. I sent Ron, my husband, ahead of me. There's no need for him to have to check his suitcase as well. So he may as well go and get on the plane. Now I still had to see the ticketing agent, and so I thought, well, maybe I have another chance. So I expressed my same concern to the ticket agent. I was kind, but I was very persistent with my concern that my bag probably won't make it to PEI. And so she actually listened to me. She was like, oh, let me look up your flight. And so she looked at the flights, and she was like, oh, there is no time between your flights. And I was like, oh, okay, she's going to let me go on the plane with my bag. But then she tried to convince me that, well, it's not so bad. If your suitcase doesn't arrive at the same time you do, it will come on a later flight. You'll still get it. And then I'm like, well, what if it gets lost? Anyway, I was in this panicked anxiety mode. And so she was so good, because she said to me, well, you know what? I still have to tag your bag because it's too big, according to the measurement. There was limited space. But you know what? You can get in line and go down and see if there's room. And if there's not, the baggage handler will be at the top of the gate, and he can take your bag if there's no room. So I thought, oh, well, there's a chance. I can get my bag on the plane. And so I got in line, and I slowly made myself down the passenger boarding bridge to the plane. And I started to accept that the likelihood of my bag being with me was not probably going to happen. So as soon as I got on the plane, kind of just entered the little doorway, they announced that the carry-on compartments were full. So everyone on the bridge had to check their bags, even if they hadn't been tagged. And so there I go. It's defeated. Why did I get picked on? So if only I had not been picked out of line, I would have had my luggage with me. I kept thinking I just couldn't get out of this cycle. So I was angry. I was angry at the whole process. I was like, flying is already stressful. Why do they have to do this? In that moment, I had forgotten who I was. Self had taken center stage. And so I found Ron, and I found our seats, and I plunked myself down. It is what it is, but inside, I was in turmoil. So my mind started to reel, thinking of all the things I could have done differently to keep my bags with me. I just couldn't let it go. I was just processing. And so then I noticed the couple sitting in front of me. She sat down and she just started to cry. And I was like, oh man, what happened? And I overheard her saying that she was heading to her mother's funeral. And the dress that her mother was going to be wearing in the casket was in her carry-on. And she had worked with the attendant they had to scramble to find a place to keep her bag on the plane with her. And I was like, whoa. So something inside of me asked, would have you checked your luggage for her? This is a big question. I was like, maybe? But then I was like, I'd hope someone else would first, because I am stuck. I'm obviously still not returning to myself yet. So I was stuck in the cycle of emotions. And something in me was really struggling, even though in the big picture, it was my fault for pushing the limits and not being prepared that this could happen. Seriously, I should just be happy that I could fly home to see my family. Who cares about the luggage? Like really, but I couldn't get out of this place because I was so stuck on self. So at one point, this peace kind of just settles over me, kind of this warm and calming peace, in the sense that it might really all just be okay. What if my luggage arrives just fine in PEI? And it's like, Tracy, you're expending all this energy. You are upset by something you can't control at this point. It's out of your hands. You've just left your family. Just relax. Just rest. It's like, yes, that's good. And then my mind goes back to ruminating. What could have I done differently to get pulled out of the line? How could have I prevented that? And when we're stressed, our mind, my mind anyway, does weird things. Like I could change anything at this point, but I was still trying to figure out how I could have prevented it. So my flight to Toronto was mixed with journaling on something totally different, sleeping, snacking, and then ruminating, and then repeat for 4 hours. So 4 hours later, we arrive in Toronto. Everything has gone smoothly. Our flight is 10 minutes early. And the voice inside me again says, what if your bag arrives with you in PEI? What if everything is just fine? So I text my mom to tell her that we arrived in Toronto safely, and I asked her to pray that my bag arrives, that I had to check it. And then my husband, Ron, also says that, I see other people from our flight, on this flight to PEI, I think there's a good chance your bag will be fine. It will arrive. And then he proceeds to remind me of why it's not good to push limits. I was like, yep, I've been telling myself that all along. Basically, it's like trying to get yourself out of a speeding ticket by saying that you saw 20 other cars going faster than you today. It's just not going to work. It's not going to work. So we get on the plane to PEI, and the captain comes on saying that everything is going very smoothly, and they're going to wait a few extra moments as there's some luggage that is being loaded last minute. And Ron elbows me. I'm still not convinced, though. Until I see my bag in PEI, I will not believe. So anyway, I did come to accept at that point that whether the bag arrived or not, it's going to be fine. So it literally took me 5 hours to get to that place. But that's good news, because in the past, my time frames are getting shorter with some of these stresses. And so the good news is my bag arrived in PEI. It arrived with our flights, and it was one of the first bags on the carousel. And I had been able to return to trusting before that moment. But this process, and like I said, this process did not take days. It took hours. But I knew that there was something else that I needed to learn from this situation, but I couldn't put my finger on it. But I knew because I wasn't completely settled. I had let go of the luggage thing, but there was something else. Something was churning inside of me. Something happened that was bigger than having to check my bag. And it had to do with how I navigated the ticket agents in Calgary that insisted I check my bag. Something happened in that moment, and I was convinced that I should have been able to get myself out of that situation, and I was not able to. I was convinced. I lived in the story for a while this week wanting to learn what was really going on inside of me. And I told this story to a few people just to kind of see what would come of it. And I shared it with Josh, who said, "Isn't it great that you got to allow others to keep their luggage on the plane by checking yours?" I was like, right, yes, that didn't cross my mind at all. It was good advice, Josh. If I was putting Jesus at the center of my life, that would have been the response, but it was not, because I was putting self there. So yes, I was living from that place of self. And then after Josh said that, I listened to his message from last week. And I don't know, I know many people were away last week, so if you haven't had a chance to listen, it's really good, and I highly recommend it. And he talks about, in his message, the 3 temptations that Jesus faced in the wilderness. And these 3 temptations that Jesus faces, because remember, we've been talking about whatever Jesus had done on earth, he was redeeming us from the fact that we couldn't make a way. Only Jesus can make a way, so he's redeeming us. And so these temptations are key human desires. They're patterns that are common to all of us. So the second one, where Satan says to Jesus, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. And Jesus answered him, "It's also written, do not put the Lord your God to test." So Jesus is God. He has all power. And Satan is saying here, use your gifts and your talents for yourself. This temptation is one about power. Use your God-given gifts for yourself to further what you want to do, what's good for you. Boom. It's just like it hit me. There it is. I know I have a gift and a talent with people. I had worked in retail, very challenging situations, very tough situations. I'm gifted and I'm well-trained relationally. Instead of choosing this gift to further God's kingdom, isn't it great that I could help others and provide more space? I mean, I pushed the limits anyway. At least I could have chosen humility, which is the way of Jesus. Instead, I wanted to use my gifts and talents for myself. And when I put myself at the center, I was convinced I was missing out. I was being picked on. None of that was true. But because I was putting myself at the center, what was really true was distorted. Because I couldn't see clearly, because I put myself there. I didn't put Jesus there. What matters is that there is a choice to make. And only I can make that choice. No one forces me to do that. It's mine to make. And then I walk the consequences or the highlights of those choices. I was thinking, as I was reflecting on this with Jesus, I was thinking, everything rises and falls on our choice to follow Jesus and humbly submit ourselves to his ways. You may have heard that quote said, everything rises and falls on leadership, but I was like, you know what? No, everything rises and falls on Jesus and how we choose to put him at the center of our lives. And so to put Jesus at the center of our lives and not ourselves is this ongoing journey. And I believe it's part of the transformation. Josh talked about it after worship today. It's like every day we make that one choice, it makes it a little bit easier to be closer to keeping Jesus at the center. And so I'd just like to return to the question, or actually, I didn't end up putting this question out to you beforehand, but I'd like to ask you the question right now in your life, in the story of your life, where is Jesus trying to get your attention? Where in your life is he trying to show you that self is taking center stage and Jesus is not? Jesus never wastes anything in our life. He's always teaching in everything that we go through. We're not always great at listening, but he's always teaching. If we will just slow down and stop and pay attention. Jesus, what do you want me to know right now in this moment? And if I can just invite Sheila Ann back up in this moment just to come to the keys. there's something else that happened in this situation that was different for me as well. My sense of Jesus walking with me in this is that he wasn't angry at me. I used to have this image of God that was one that he was angry when I did something wrong, and he wanted to kick my butt. I had that sense. I grew up with an angry father, and I could do nothing right, so that's often how I saw God. And to me, things were either good or bad, and I've struggled with the whole idea of being in process, and being in process of transformation. So this situation was different, and I'm seeing that my understanding of God is changing, and I sensed him hugging me and saying, "You get it! You finally get it!" And then I see myself I was crying because I felt like such a fool. I felt like such a fool in that moment. And I could see him just wiping away my tears, and he says, "I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you." He wants that for all of us. There's no need to hide. He wants to meet us in this process of transformation, no matter how awkward or challenging or frustrating it is. And he wants you to know that he's rooting for you. He is rooting for you. And he is a wonderful father and teacher that will keep showing you that there is a better way. And the better way is to put him at the center and not ourselves. And so I wanted Sheila Ann just to lead us in just a song of worship, and just want you to come before the Father and just say, "Father, where are you trying to get my attention? Where in my life are you trying to show me that self has taken center stage and that you haven't?" And just let him show you that, and just release that to him. And say, "Father, I know I'm in process. I know I'm in transition. I know that you're rooting for me. And I want to know that in my heart that you're rooting for me." And so I'm just going to let Sheila Ann just lead us in a song, and then I'll come back and just pray over us. But just let's take some time, and just while we're quiet and while we're slowed down, just let him speak and let him show you what it is that he wants to show you today.